Now, India will be showcasing its talents at the end of this month under the mantra, 1 billion things you need to know about India. They'll be showcasing food, fashion and creating an interface for CEOs from India and South Africa to discuss investment opportunities in both countries. There'll also be a forum there called Doing Business with India. To talk to us more about how India is opening up, having invested over $37 billion in Africa as a whole, is Vikram Dorwaisani, who's the Consul General for India, who joins us now. Thank you very much, Consul General, for coming through. Over $37 billion invested across Africa by India. Just explain to us this investment strategy, and as the world recovers from the global recession, how's India looking at Africa?
Well, it's fairly simple. The short point is that with the growth of India in the last 15 to 18 years since we had changed our market strategies, there has been a need for Indian companies to go out of our shores to look for new markets, to look for new technology products, and to showcase the new changes that are coming up in India. So our companies that are particularly capital sensitive, price sensitive, and are looking at providing the best appropriate technology at value, Africa is the logical market for them to expand.
All right. Now, where we've seen India invest is in the areas of manufacturing, ICT, pharmaceuticals, media and call centers. And people often say they're looking at tertiary industries as opposed to extractive industries. This week, India extended a $125 million e-learning project for telemedicine and education distance learning to 12 African countries. Just talk to us about that focus.
Well, look, I mean, first of all, it isn't that we're not interested in the resource space. That is, of course, also happening, but we can come to that subsequently. The larger point about our interest in capacity building isn't just altruism. We do want to be able to help, but the point is our companies that are coming here are, as I said, capital sensitive and price sensitive. Right. So what they want is to be able to come here to countries of Africa, South Africa included, and employ locally. Because if we can employ locally, we save on the value of bringing in expats. We can't, bring in expats and have them here at high prices, high wages, because that then knocks the bottom line askew.
All right, let's talk about that reasoning a little bit, because we've got huge skills differentials between Africa and India. South Africa, in particular, is said to be that's the weakness of the country. India's got a burgeoning middle class of about 300 million. I don't even know if you can call it burgeoning anymore, and producing almost 9 million graduates per year from universities. Now, if you're looking at Africa as a labor pool, how do you overcome the skills deficit on the continent?
I think that's precisely the point, because what we're trying to say is here, we're not looking at Africa purely as a labor pool in the sense of having the lowest skills jobs coming here. Mm-hmm. We're not looking at this being sort of the back end of the process. We need to therefore invest in building up capacities here across the range of capacities, managerial capacities, technological capacities, training capacities, so that our own investment here then becomes profitable. Mm-hmm. So it's linked with that. This, as I said, in this real world, nobody is out there to be saintly. All
right, we've spoken about the fact that India focuses on tertiary industries, services industries, but mining, there's a sense that you need to catch up the Chinese and the Brazilians as they enter Africa within the mining space, especially with a growing demand for coal, for rubber, for steel consumption in India. How are you operating in Africa? Where are the new frontiers?
Well, that is true. I mean, particularly in South Africa, we are, of course, playing catch-up because we did establish our diplomatic relationship in South Africa much later, after democracy came here. But it's not been completely a story that's been of missed opportunities. I think a number of our companies are here now in fairly large measure. We are already the #1 purchaser of coal in South Africa, for instance. Last year, according to statistics we have, we bought something like 21 million tons of it, which put us as the single largest purchaser of South African coal, or almost 1/3 of your exports. This is the same story that's being repeated across your borders north of here. There is investment pouring in, it's not just offtake. Companies like JSW have come and picked up mines here, or coal holdings here. Right. Our intention is to be here not just for the extractive industry, but to try and be here both in utilizing the products locally, including in steel mines, and once your policy regime permits it, power generation, but also to be able to take stuff across to India for our needs.
All right. 80 Indian agricultural-based companies invested in a few African countries in purchasing land for farming activities, about 1.5 billion sterling invested in the purchase of land. Now, it serves two purposes. Africa's got a competitive advantage in agriculture. India needs to secure its food supply. But land is a very sensitive and emotive issue. How are you navigating your way around this one?
Of course, we understand. I mean, we come from a country where land is historically connected with your location in society. Yeah. So we are not unaware of the sensitivity of land. And the point that we're trying to look at, our companies are trying to look at, is not to bring our own laborers out here to farm the land, because we understand that you can't bring people out of one cultural and geographic and climatic context and move them to another and expect things to work. What we'd like to do, and this is just work that's beginning to happen, is to use the opportunities available here to, one, provide employment, two, contribute to food production in the countries that we invest in, and to take some of that surplus away. So it's not meant to be in any sense an exploitative strategy. And I think people can see that difference, because the investment that's coming from India is not about ring fencing a bit of land and then saying all this stuff grows here and goes to us. It's about trying to bring local people, local capacities, and contribute to the communities.
We spoke earlier on about the fact that India is now competing with other emerging market economies, Brazil, Russia, China, as they invest in Africa. And we know that Africa's trade with emerging market economies has now grown to 30% of total global trade. How are you competing against the Brazilians, the Russians as they move into oil and gas in West Africa, the Chinese, who are now the number one trading partner for almost all of African countries?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to make the point that we don't see this as a competition. Mm-hmm. Each of the countries that you named in the BRIC group have their own strengths. Right. And I think it would be folly on our part, at least, if we were to look at this and say this is a competition, we're going to try and do what country X or country Y does. I think we should play to our strengths. Our strengths are, as I said, private sector-led investment, capacity-based investment, where we try and create a niche where we're good at it. We build capacities locally, and then we try and make money jointly.
But I think people who talk about competition would say, for instance, China's strategy is state-led investment, whereas, as you're saying, it's private sector-led investment. And that makes it a little more risky in the sense that you've got to bear the cost of the capital as a private entity. You don't have a sovereign wealth fund from a government supporting you. And probably that's where the limitations lie, or they're not limitations. Well,
in any strategy there are limitations. But as I said, first of all, you have to be true to yourself. Can you run somebody else's race? I suspect not. Mm-hmm. What works for China, for instance, works for them, and more power to them. But what works for us, it would be very silly for us to abandon what works for us and try and do something else.